Chapter 16. The Stockade. They saw then that Eben's left moccasin was covered with blood, which dripped down inside the buckskin legging. The leather had prevented it from soaking through and becoming visible. Eben tried to grin. "It ain't but a scratch," he gritted through white lips. "I got it wrestling, that pesky catawaba back yonder. He stuck me in the thigh before I could settle him." Guy and Riach helped him up, as the gate of the stockade opened and a group of figures ran out towards them. They were led by a big, fair-bearded man, dressed in buckskins and carrying a rifle. Strangely, he wore a laced, cocked hat, instead of the coonskin cap favoured by most woodsmen. As they came up, the big man bawled, "Hurry up and get inside the post. Them varmints will be having another go before long." "Gently, Master Foxley," answered Sir Robert. "These lads are spent with running, and one of them has a wound." The big man grunted. He had a red, jolly face and small blue eyes which twinkled shrewdly. Guy suspected that craft and cunning lay behind them, as well as good temper. "Well, they must get in, just the same," said Foxley. "If they can't walk, we'll have to tote 'em." Just then he caught sight of Eben, drooping feebly between Guy and the little Highlander, and grinned through his blonde whiskers. "Eben Willits. Howdy, you old catamount. Can't keep out of trouble, can you?" "Hi, Abner," Eben replied with his old wry smile. "I reckoned you're going to get some of your own pretty soon. The whole Cherokee Nation's on the way down, to meet up with these ragtag and bobtail catawabbas." "Cherokees?" The mirth left Foxley's visage quickly. "You ain't fooling, Eben, are you?" "Sure ain't. But let's get inside the stockade to do our palavering. Ain't too healthy out here." "That's so. Here." Big Abner thrust his rifle into Guy's hands. "Let's get a hold of ye and I'll hump you in there." He picked up the trapper in his arms like a baby, with a gentleness that did not match his rough greeting. Eben was sickly pale and weak now, but he reached up to grasp a fistful of the thick blonde beard and yanked it feebly. "Wait till I've had a meal and a few hours' snooze," he croaked. "Then I'll show you whether you can pick me off my feet or put me down, either for that matter." "Shucks," grunted Foxley. "You couldn't do that when you was strung. In your shape, like being about as powerful as a day-old kitten for quite a spell yet. You can start bragging in about a month." He turned, with Eben in his arms, and loped back to the gate as if his load were no more than a handful of goose feathers. Inside the palisade, men shut the gate after them quickly as soon as they entered. Anne was there, waiting for them anxiously. Her father patted her on the shoulder when she clung to him. "There, my chick," he boomed. "All's well now, except for poor Volks. He was a faithful servant to us both, and had spent all his days with our family. Why, I remember him being born just before the war ended." Sir Robert meant the War of the Spanish Succession, which ceased with the Treaty of Utrecht in 1713. He pulled out a large yellow handkerchief and blew his nose loudly. "Perhaps it's as well that his old mother ain't alive to hear of it, poor soul." Anne dried her eyes and managed a smile for Guy. Then, as if remembering, she let the smile fade and turned from him to go indoors with Sir Robert. The look hurt Guy deeper than any of his tussles with the Indians. It was bad enough being a convict, without her thinking of him as something even worse. Not that he could ever claim to do any more than serve her at any time. She was a great lady, daughter of a high family, and he was only a waif at best. But he wished she knew the truth of the affair at Gervase Holly's plantation, that she would believe he had nothing to do with it. Still, he told himself there was no use worrying over that. Now that they were back in some kind of civilization, there would be more urgent things to fret about, when this business with the Indians was done with. There were laws dealing with runaway slaves. The two Scots and himself had to expect severe punishment when they were sent back to the plantation, and beyond that, he was a suspected murderer. But all that was still to come. Bitter and dejected, he decided that he would grieve about it when it did. Nothing was to be got by snivelling before it happened. He put the whole matter out of his mind resolutely, and looked about him. The gate was shut and barred, with heavy logs dropped into sockets behind it, so that nothing short of a battering ram could burst it open. Behind it and around the stockade, men armed with muskets and the longer, more accurate rifles peered through loopholes, alertly to watch for the attack that would come at any time. The stockade enclosed a kind of yard. It contained a number of huts and lean-to sheds, some of which were stables. The main building was long, and better constructed than the rest, with a porch and stone chimneys. All the buildings were of logs. Abner Foxley carried Eben into the big cabin, and Guy followed him with Alistair and Riach. Indoors he found that the place seemed to be a combined warehouse and inn. The room they entered was large, and not uncomfortable, in a rough and ready style. It had tables and chairs, and a wooden settle covered with a bearskin rug near the fire. A long counter ran along one wall, and Guy saw furs stacked behind it in bales, one above the other. The fire burnt on a wide hearth of boulders cemented with clay, under the rock chimney. It was of fat pine logs which spluttered merrily and gave off a pleasant scent. But it was not the smell of the logs which aroused his interest. An iron pot simmered on the fire. A whiff of it reached his nostrils, rich with cooking, and he suddenly remembered that he was famished. Pemmican was all very well, he thought, but it had not anything like the flavour of a good thick stew. A luscious, fragrant stew, with meat in it, that would stick to a fellow's ribs. A stew, in fact, like the one that was bubbling away now in that pot. Then he looked at Eben, sprawled out on the wooden settle, and was ashamed of himself for thinking about food when his comrade was injured. He ought not to have done that, even though he was starving. They had taken off the deerskin leggings, and Abner was looking at the wound. It was a deep gash in the lean brown thigh, and still bled freely. By good luck the Indian's knife had just missed the femoral artery. A half-inch to the right, and Eben would have bled to death long before they could have got him into the stockade. "It's clean, anyhow," growled Abner. "You'll be as good as new. Soon it's healed." An Indian woman brought a bowl of hot water and a bundle of white linen. She elbowed Foxley away and began to bathe the wound. She had a face like a carved tobacco pipe that had once belonged to Guy's father, brown and wooden and flat-nosed. If anything, the face on the pipe had shown more expression. The squaw washed the injury and clapped on a mess of herbs, which had a bad, pungent smell. Then she bound it with strips of linen, firmly and carefully. She had neat, nimble fingers. Eben looked better when she had done. "That's dandy," he bragged. "Reckon I could do another week's running on that if I had to." "Only running you'll do is with your clacking tongue," jeered Big Abner. "For the next month, anyhow. Sit still and try to look like you've a mite more sense than the silly jaybird." "I'll be on my feet in an hour or two. It'll be all hands to the stockade when the Injuns bring their fight. It's getting near dusk." "We'll see about that when they start their mischief," Abner said. "But you've time for a mouthful of grub first. Where's that squaw?" He raised his voice in a huge bellow, and the Indian woman came in to gaze at him stolidly with her black shoe-button eyes. "These fellows are hungry," Abner told her. "Dish 'em up some vitals, old gal." The squaw sniffed. Then, without reply so much as a word, she went to a cupboard and took out pewter plates and horn spoons. These she clattered onto one of the tables, in a way that showed her disapproval of greedy men, though not a flicker crossed her countenance. But Guy found that her mask of solemnity hid a kindly nature after all, for when she handed him a brimming dish there was a kindly spark in the dark eyes. "Bear meat," she grunted. "You good boy, eat 'em up, get strong." All of them wolfed the stew with more regard for their hunger than for good manners. It ran through them like a river of strength, putting vigour into them and taking the edge off their weariness. While they ate, Eben told Abner of the coming invasion. The trader listened carefully, without interruption, until he had finished. "Sounds tough," he growled at length. "Mighty tough. What's to be done about it?" "I was hoping to get word down river to the settlement," Eben said. His voice turned harsh as he went on. "There'll be old Harry to pay if them red imps hit the tidewater and the folks down there ain't warned." Abner frowned. "Don't see what we can do about it. It's too late." "You can take it for sure that the Catawbas have got this place surrounded long since." Guy listened to the two woodsmen talking. He knew the peril that threatened the colony. If this huge army of Indians reached the lowlands and found them unprotected, there would be nothing left in the Carolines but burnt ruins and corpses. "Would it not be possible for someone to creep through them?" he asked. They turned to look at him in surprise. Then Eben shook his head with a rueful smile. "Son," he answered quietly, "there ain't a hope. We can't raise a party strong enough to fight its way through 'em, and no man could sneak out on his own. Not even a bug could pass 'em without being seen." Abner nodded. "That's a fact. There's too many of the reptiles to make it even a chance. All we can do is try to hold 'em here, as long as we can. We can stand 'em off for a while at least." Now Alistair broke in. "It looks to be a strong place. Are you well provided with food and arms?" "Sure. We can stand a siege. Guess you'd better get fitted out with guns and powder. We got plenty, and you'll need 'em before long." He rose and went to a door that led off the main room, his immense bulk looming tremendous in the dusk that now filtered through the windows. Unfastening a padlock, he threw the door open. "In here, boys. Pick out what you want." The door led to a small closet, which he used as a strong room, for there were iron-bound chests in there, as well as a big rack of firearms. Abner gave them each a musket and a bag of bullets, and filling horns with fine black powder. "French," he growled, as the grains trickled through the funnel he used. "A heap better than the stuff the government sells. Goes off first pop with no fizzing and misfiring." He was brought up by a yell from the yard outside. "Stand to! Everybody! Here they come!" Guy rushed back into the main room, in time to see a flaming arrow describe a soaring arc over the palisade. On its heels came the shrill, hideous whoop of the redskins beyond. Abner Foxley tore past him into the yard, nearly knocking him down. "Come on!" he bellowed. "Get to the stockade!"